Well, you know I am a boxing fan. We've had a lot of I can't even talk now. MMA interviews recently because a lot of big stuff going on in MMA. But I was 5 years old when I went to my first boxing match, and still a big time love in my life. And so, who better to join me to talk a little bit about boxing than the Hall of Famer, Mr. Al Bernstein? How are you, Al?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, we don't ever want to lose you from boxing completely to mixed martial arts, although I'm a mixed martial arts fan as well. So I enjoy seeing it and I love your coverage of that sport. But we never want Kevin Iole to not be involved in the sport of boxing. That would be tragic.
I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I love it. And as long as I have anything to do with it, it won't happen.
Yes.
Al, I should mention, everybody may know him from Showtime and his work at ESPN as well. He's now doing some work for DAZN on the big time boxing shows. Dmitry Salita, our friend Dmitry Salita, the former boxer who has now gotten into promotion. And now you actually have a show on Dimitri's YouTube channel that you do.
Yeah, we're calling it Big Time Boxing. We're just mimicking the show he does. But yeah, we have all kinds of fun guests on, and I chat with all of them and give my views on boxing. And it's a chance for me to, as you do, to interact with boxing fans. And I'm enjoying it. I love, I went a couple of years without having that vehicle. And I was so busy, to be honest. The schedule at Showtime got so stacked up that it was kind of hard to do. And now I have a chance to do it. Of course, I'm doing the DAZN shows, but I have an opportunity to do this. And so it's been fun. And folks can see all the episodes over on the Salita Promotions YouTube channel.
You want to do that. Dimitri is really trying to start a ground, breaking, young fighters and develop young fighters. And kind of we saw that, Showbox did that. We don't have that anymore. ESPN back in the day, Top Rank Boxing on ESPN back in the day that you called in the early days of ESPN. So we need that kind of vehicle for young fighters to develop. So that's good with Dimitri.
Yeah. Fun series to work on, and we just had one in Puerto Rico at the Coca-Cola Arena, and it was really fun. And it turned out to be a really nice fight with Josh Pagan and Haskell Rhodes, who's a veteran who fought his best fight in the last 4 or 5 years. He summoned, on only 2 weeks' notice, somehow he summoned this to look like he did 5 years ago or 7 years ago. It was actually an amazing performance by him. Pagan still won, but it was a fun atmosphere, and shows have been fun to do. So it's fun to be involved with seeing talent develop, as I did many years ago, as you point out on the ESPN show.
Yeah, a lot of good things. I actually last night was hosting a dinner in honor of Bob Arum, the longtime boxing promoter.
Oh.
Bob was honored by Jewish Nevada for his philanthropic efforts that he had done over the years. And so they had me up there to interview Bob and kind of ask questions. So we had a lot of stories about the old days. So we heard all that going on. So some crazy stuff. But let's talk a little bit about more current boxing, Alan. And before we look forward, I want to go back to Saturday. In some people's minds, a massive upset. Tim Tszyu was knocked out in the third round by Bakhram Murtazaliev. Murtazaliev dropped him 4 times. Tszyu's corner finally threw in the towel. I thought the referee was a little late, to be honest with you. He should have stepped in a bit earlier. But what did you make of Tim Tszyu's performance? And I also, let me add to this, a lot of the Australian media is being very critical of Tszyu's team for taking this fight. I don't criticize them, and I'll explain why later. I want to hear what you think.
I agree with you. Look, there's a lot of people on the. Let's deal with that first, and I'll talk about the fight. Hindsight is, of course, wonderful, right? And they're talking about, he fought Fundora, and that turned out bad for him, and fighting Murtazaliev turned out bad for him. First of all, Fundora, when he fought him, had been knocked out by Mendoza, who he beat, and he had knocked out Fundora. The match, that matchup, but also going back to even when he fought Sebastian Fundora, who was a fighter who lost and was knocked out by a fighter that Tszyu had beaten. And in the first 2 rounds of that fight, Tim Tszyu was winning handily and had already hurt Fundora. And in my opinion, had that fight continued without the elbow clash and the bad cut, I think Tszyu would have won it. And now Murtazaliev, right? So took a while off after Fundora. They healed everything. They had a chance to fight what was perceived as the most vulnerable of the 154-pound champions. Murtazaliev had just had a fight where he won the fight against Jack Culcay, who was 39 years old, not a terrible fighter, but he's 39 years old and he's not an A-level fighter. And Murtazaliev didn't win that fight that easily. Culcay got a lot done offensively. And when I was looking at that fight, I rightfully thought to myself, well, Tim Tszyu is the favorite in the fight. Murtazaliev was a decent fighter. Murtazaliev had never fought as well before this fight as he did against Tim Tszyu. So the hindsight criticism of Tim Tszyu and his team, in my opinion, is unwarranted. The result didn't end up being correct for them. In either of those fights, but I don't think you can quibble with the decision to do them. As for the fight itself, very good performance by Murtazaliev, and Tim Tszyu early on in the fight did what he normally does. He was landing some really good right hands, and then things went south for him. And what that says about him at this juncture is anybody's guess. Does this mean he was gun shy still from the Fundora fight? Does it just mean that Murtazaliev is a strong fighter who landed the right punches? Remains to be seen. You know, I referenced back that some people have suggested that when he did the Culcay fight, you know, he's a devout Muslim. It was during the Ramadan period. He might not have been at his top of his game. I don't know. That might be the case, or it might not be. But
he said that himself, so you gotta, you know.
Yeah, whatever it is, he performed very well against Tim Tszyu.
You know, I thought the criticism was unwarranted as well, Al, because forget about everything else. Where was he going to go get a championship back, right? So, you know, so he lost to Fundora. Fundora's going in a different direction, and so you're sitting there and you're saying, well, is he going to fight Terence Crawford? You know, okay, that's not going to happen. And what kind of matchmaking would that be if you're criticizing him for fighting Murtazaliev? You have to go fight Terence Crawford. So I thought it made sense. You know, it was a fight. It was a winnable fight. He didn't win it. I thought in the first round, and I was watching on Amazon Prime, as I'm sure you were, and you know, I was saying to myself, my God, it sounds like a movie, how loud they're hitting each other. When you heard the punches land, you know, it was like whap. And I thought, you know, Murtazaliev was really hitting him hard in the first round. And I thought that the knockdowns and then subsequently the stoppage were set up by those big shots landed in the first round. Did you get that sense that Murtazaliev was landing hard early? I thought Tim did as well, but I thought Murtazaliev landed very hard in the first.
Well, it kind of ended up being that, didn't it? Because Tszyu did land some really good right hands. But at the end of the day, Murtazaliev's were more powerful, or Tim's punch resistance wasn't, Tszyu's punch resistance wasn't as good as it might have been, or as you would hope it would be. And Murtazaliev is a strong guy. He's a physically strong guy. But again, we hadn't seen that kind of explosive punching power against a top-level fighter. And in fact, Tszyu was by far the best fighter he had fought in his career. So it just he ended up being a powerful guy. And is this the Murtazaliev we'll see moving forward, right? Or
he's been a touted guy. He's had some people talking about him. Yeah. You know, Al, I want to say this about Tszyu in his mindset. I thought it wasn't a matchmaking problem. It was this kind of a problem because I thought he went into the fight. You know, the fact that he stood square in front of a guy, right? You rarely do that. That's not a good thing in professional boxing when you're fighting a world-class fighter. And he just stood in there and said, I want to trade. And even his interview with Jordan Plant afterwards, you know, he referenced that. Well, you know, it's not about being a hero and looking like a tough guy. It's about winning the fight and moving forward in your career. And I just thought, you know, maybe he felt, and maybe it was a result of criticism he took for his performance against Fundora, but I kind of felt like he fought the wrong fight in his strategy. He had in his head that I'm going to stand here and try to bully this guy, and you know, and he paid the price for it.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, oftentimes the strategic thing is the problem, and there's no question in that fight he looked vulnerable defensively from the way he fought it, and maybe felt the need to dominate too much because of what had preceded it, and paid the price for it. So obviously he'll take a long rest, and they'll have to think about how they want to come back. I suspect when he comes back, it will be it'll be a fight that they think is more manageable, maybe even against an opponent that is, even if he's a competent, good fighter, might not be a big hitter. And Tim Tszyu is not one to take tune-up fights, that's for sure. But I think they might want to think about going in that direction. And Murtazaliev now, with his championship and with this good performance in a division that, the 154-pound division for a while there was one of the hottest in boxing. Then it cooled off just a little, and now it is, along with the 140-pound division, in my opinion, those two are, to me, the most interesting divisions in boxing with a lot of depth. So, creates another spice to the division.
There's not a lot going on in boxing. We got a fight in England this week, Jack Catterall and Regis Prograis. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about the press conference that was in England today. Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk got together. We were recording this on Wednesday, October 23rd, and they had a press conference for their rematch for the heavyweight championship in December, which will be once again in Riyadh. Usyk, of course, won a split decision when they fought in May, dropped Tyson Fury. I don't know if you happen to see it, but Usyk came dressed as a hitman from a video game, carried a briefcase. He was wearing the gloves.
He's a very eclectic guy.
And he said next to nothing in the press. Literally, he had one question where he said it's just a character, and I think that was his longest answer in the whole thing. But what he did, and so this is my question to you, is he had a briefcase that everybody's wondering what's in the briefcase. So he finally opens the briefcase. He walks over to Fury wearing his suit with the white shirt and red tie, and he hands a photo, and you can't see the photo, and he has Fury sign the photo. And then when he turns around and he shows it, it's a picture of Usyk hitting Fury and hurting him in the 9th round of that fight where Fury got in big trouble in the fight. So he's obviously trying to mind games right off the bat. Do you think that works against a guy like Tyson Fury?
It makes for good theater, obviously. And you wonder, because when you get to that level, right? So you and I have talked to many, many boxers over the years, and you just wonder. Listen, I'll even go back. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I'll go back to doing amateur boxing 50 years ago for me. And there was one guy in the Golden Gloves that I could not beat. I fought him like 3 times, and I could not beat this guy. And he knew it, and I knew it. And it wasn't even just, we weren't that far apart in ability, but there was something about him. And was it in my head? Yes. And I mean, that's like a million years ago on a whole other level, but it's boxing. And the boxers I talk to, they always say that sometimes it's hard to get past certain things. And the thing about Usyk is, and with a guy like Fury, here's this guy, this cruiserweight, who stood up to him. We have this big giant heavyweight, and they had a brawl, not a brawl. That's the wrong way to put it, because there was a lot of technique. They had a fight, right? Yes, they didn't have a boxing match. They had a fight. Both men landed big punches, and the cruiserweight came closer to knocking out the big heavyweight than the big heavyweight came to knocking out the cruiserweight. That's significant. So I think somewhere in all this, Usyk wants to remind Tyson Fury of that simple fact and see if that alone will get into his head.
One of the cliches that they say in boxing all the time is any punch from a 200-plus pound guy hurts. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw that in that fight. And that makes me to draw a parallel between Usyk and Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was light heavyweight in the Olympics, should have been a gold medalist. He becomes a bronze medalist because of the disqualification. And then he becomes the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, then the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Holyfield now is regarded as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Mm-hmm. Said it maybe in 1988. Evander Holyfield is going to be the greatest heavyweight of all, or one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. People laughed you out of there, right? So I'm going to ask you now: is Oleksandr Usyk on a path where, when he retires, he is going to be considered one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time?
The answer to that question, here's what he's going to be considered. If he wins against Fury, and I don't know what he's going to do after that. He may retire, but he's sounding like he might not retire. If he puts together a win against Fury and one more win against any other top heavyweight, even if he doesn't, he should rightfully be remembered as the best heavyweight of this era. Yes. And this era of heavyweights has been a lot of fun. We've had a giant hitter in Wilder. We've had a big enigmatic fighter who oftentimes we think is very special and sometimes not in Joshua. And then we had Tyson Fury, who is one of the most interesting heavyweights and no question, a tough man for any heavyweight ever to fight because of his size and the way he fights. And of all those people and I'm writing an article for Ring Magazine about this era in heavyweight division. Here's Usyk, who you have to say becomes the dominant figure. Yes. Now, how does that translate to of all time? I think it certainly puts him in the conversation to be in the top 10 of the great heavyweight champions. However you rank them, I'm not big on ranking people and picking the best of this and the best of that, but there's no question he's got to be in that conversation because, and you made a great comparison to Holyfield. You and I both are old enough to remember when people weren't even sure, as you alluded to, that Evander Holyfield was going to be a good heavyweight. Right. You know, I mean, he was a cruiserweight and he was great cruiserweight. How will he do against the bigger guys? Well, you know, obviously, and he had to fight real big guys. Not just Tyson, who's a huge puncher, Riddick Bowe, who was very big, Lennox Lewis, who was very big. You know, he was in against big people. So I think
George Foreman.
Yeah, let's not forget George Foreman. Right. Thank you. I forgot about him. And George Foreman put up a courageous effort against Evander Holyfield and even had good moments. So I think Usyk, and I wrote this in another column in Ring Magazine, you cannot underestimate what Usyk has done in this period. First, he did something as a cruiserweight that was truly remarkable in beating on the road every tough cruiserweight there was, and they were a lot of really good fighters. Then he moves up to the heavyweight division and becomes the undisputed heavyweight champion and defeats all these giant guys. What he's done in the last 5 years or 6 years of his boxing career, it's almost unparalleled in a way.
It's incredible. I'm so amazed by him. And, you know, we didn't mention Daniel Dubois he beat. And so, you know, he had that one as well. So I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a chance if he beats Fury in this fight, he may retire. But if he stays on, you know, you've got guys like Zhilei Zhang out there and you know, guys that I wouldn't say are superstar level heavyweights, but are good above average heavyweights who have that power that can make a big difference. And or maybe if he beats Fury, he gets does another rematch with Dubois. But even if he beats Fury, you're thinking he would have 2 wins over Fury, 2 wins over Joshua, a win over Dubois, and was the undisputed heavyweight champ and the undisputed cruiserweight champ. I mean, to me, that puts him in a really, really, really special category.
It's not too bad, I'll tell you. You know, that's pretty remarkable. And of course, Tyson Fury will have something to say about whether he's 2-0 over Fury. And I can't wait for that fight. I really think it's going to be I thought their first fight was wonderful and filled with drama and a few faux pas, in my opinion, by the referee, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, if you're at all a boxing fan, what's more interesting than to see these two guys fight again?
100%. If Fury's to win it, if Fury's to change the fight and win this, what do you think he has to do? What didn't he do well enough in the first fight that he has to do better this time?
Well, we can look at that sequence of rounds in which he looked like he was taking over the fight, right? And did in fact win a number of rounds where he was able to fight at length, use his jab very effectively, land a straight right hand, and keep Usyk at range and not get hit with the left hand, which, you know, obviously it's a big issue. That was an issue for him. So if he can do that, fight at range, use his height and reach, and and drop in those right hands and continue to be disciplined that way. And here's the other thing he has to do. He has got to finish. Usyk wins the last quarter of every fight he's in. Every fight. He never does poorly in the last 4 or 5 rounds of a fight. Tyson Fury, on the other end, has had a few moments in fights, not always, where things have slid down. He has to finish that fight. He's got to be, if you can't get Usyk out of there, which he didn't the last time, he's got to be able to perform in those final rounds in order to get a decision.
When you fight Tyson Fury, 6'9", roughly 270 pounds, the distance is always going to be an important thing. And one of the things, like before he fought Fury, I watched both of his Joshua fights, and I noticed when I would stop a fight, he was always at the distance he wanted to be at, right? Yeah. He was either in that mid distance, right, where he was landing and it was harder for him. And he never got all the way in. Where if he's all the way in, AJ's going to have trouble. Or if he's on that long distance where AJ's reach would be a factor. And I think when you look, he made the adjustment in the second half of that fight with Fury where he found where he wanted to be. And if he can keep that up, I think he can repeat his first victory.
Yeah, it's a very good point because he started out the fight okay. Then there was that period where it wasn't okay and where Fury had the range. And then he was able to close it enough so they could get that left hand in, which ultimately was, was the one that hurt Fury. And then he, because he's such a good combination puncher, was able to build on that. That is, you made a reference to the Joshua fight. And that's one of the things that was interesting about the Joshua fight, that he doesn't, he's not the kind of fighter that's going to be right on your chest always fighting, but he wants that mid-range where he can land and then still use some angles and move around. But against the real tall heavyweights, if he's at the long range of that, it's difficult for him. But yeah, he's a master. Well, that's the other thing. His boxing IQ is astronomical, right? It just is. And so he's one of those natural people that has figured out a way to do all these things in the ring. And so when you're fighting him, you're dealing with a guy that instinctively can neutralize a lot of things that you're doing.
Yeah, he reminds me in a way, not in style in any way, but of two fighters, Juan Manuel Marquez and Floyd Mayweather, both of whom were so smart and they could figure out on the fly how to make adjustments. Yeah. And that's kind of what he does. I want to wrap it up just very quickly, touching on one other fight, which is Mike Tyson. A 58-year-old Mike Tyson is going to be fighting Jake Paul, or we're scheduled to fight Jake Paul. Let's just leave it at that. Believe me, now that I'm older than 58 years old, Al, I understand how difficult it is at 58 years old to be doing what Mike Tyson is trying to do. So what kind of credence do you give to the thought that Mike can deliver a good performance against a 27-year-old man who, even if we say Jake isn't a great fighter, and we know he's nowhere near the talent that Mike Tyson is, right? Yeah. But what kind of credence would you give to the notion that Mike can perform against Jake because he still has that power, given the fact that Jake's going to probably be in better condition, quicker, fresher, blah, 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 blah?
Well, at the end of the day, Jake Paul is a person that if he was fighting as a professional against only professional cruiserweights, would be probably 7-3 against these lower level cruiserweight type people. He beat some of them, and he did in fact have a win against, but he would be that kind of guy. Okay, so, but a guy at age 20, in his 20s doing that. And now you have Mike Tyson over here. Oh, and by the way, a guy who has some power in his right hand. Okay, I mean, he does have some power in his right hand. Yeah. And then now you have Mike Tyson here at age 58, who, let us remind ourselves, and I announced his last 2 actual fights against Williams and McBride when he was fighting as a professional fighter, and he lost both those fights. And that was Mike Tyson, much younger and still actively participating as a heavyweight. So here we have him now at age 58 with only the exhibition things that he did recently. And he's in there against a guy who is going to, we presume, compete as hard as he can in what is a true setting of a fight. You know, it all boils down, I guess, to whether Mike Tyson at that age is strong enough to hurt Jake Paul, and can he land a punch to hurt Jake Paul? If he doesn't do that, you would think that Jake Paul would be able to do whatever he wants to do in the ring, I would think, because of his age and because he's active in doing it. It's not that Jake Paul's the greatest fighter on the planet. He's active in doing it and has been doing it. And it's all about, you know, this whole thing. We live in an era where if something is marketable, it can happen, whether it's in, you know, in sports, certain sports, whether it's in music, whether it's in whatever. We could even extend this conversation into our civic affairs, which I won't do. But the point is, if something is marketable or it is intriguing, it can happen, appropriateness aside. And that's what this is. By the way, let me point out real quick thing. One of the more interesting things about this card is that Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano are fighting on it in a fight that is wildly anticipated by boxing fans as a rematch of one of the great women's matches of all time.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. I want to throw this at you, and then we'll wrap. I'm going to draw a comparison with Big George Foreman when he fought Michael Moore, right? Foreman's style, you could conserve energy because big and lumbering, and he just would move forward, and he was there. But when he threw the punch, you know, even if it was a slow punch, boom, you know, he hurt you. Mike's style, the bob and weave and the move in the shoulders, that requires a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
When you look when Mike put these clips out of him training, and you see him fast for a couple seconds, but what do you see? You see him bob and weave once and throw one or two punches, and then you don't see any more. They're not putting out 1 round or 1 minute. They're putting out 10 seconds. And that's, you know, telling me they know kind of Mike, you know, and this is not Mike is 50 times, 500 times, 5,000 times the boxer that Jake Paul is. Like, not even in the same universe.
Right, of course.
You know that. But, you know, when I look at it, I go, well, can Mike, like you say, Mike's style, if he's going to fight his style, he can't fight like George Foreman fought. No. You know, George could come forward, and maybe George, at whatever he is, 70, is the 50th anniversary of his fight with Ali is next week. So, you know, George is close to 80 years old. George could probably walk out that style and do it good against Mike against Jake as Mike is going to do. But do you think there's anything to that? And do you think the energy that Mike's style requires is going to be a downfall for him in the fight?
Well, that's an interesting point, because even the way he does it, as you point out, it's different. You know, if you wanted to make an analogy, you know, he's more Joe Frazier than he is George Foreman because of the style, the way he has to do it. And you're right. When you see these videos, it's 10 seconds and you see him working the pads real quickly or doing whatever. The question of whether he could sustain, if Jake Paul doesn't get whacked with the left hook, you know, if you're Mike Tyson for this fight, I think I shudder to even say stylistic things about this fight, but nonetheless, that's what we're doing. I want to walk out to the middle of that ring and start throwing double left hooks, period. You know, I want to, you're right when you say there's this, you know, Mike Tyson has this style, whatever, but he's not facing a giant heavyweight. He's either going to get hit with a Jake Paul right hand that is going to knock him out, or he's not, right? That's basically, you know, and so you could jab your way in a little bit and then get in front of him and just crank up those double left hooks to the body and the head. At the end of the day, you're going to find out, if you do that, can Jake Paul take the, am I at 58 able to do that still powerfully enough? And is Jake Paul going to be able to take those? That's the to me, the stylistic way that he has to fight this fight, and not be thinking about the overall technique of, you know, like you say, you know, am I, how much do I have to feint? How much do I have to, whatever. You have to get in there and crank those double left hooks up and see if you can knock them out.
That is why this man is in more Hall of Fames than I even knew existed. This Al Bernstein is in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, but you take every Hall of Fame that's out there, and Al Bernstein, a good bet is in it.
John Katzlamides, our good friend with the Review Journal, who always covers me in my other profession as a singer. He always makes jokes about the Hall of Fame thing, and he keeps creating Hall of Fames he thinks I should be in that are not. But who knows? Maybe I paid my way into some of those. I'm not sure, Kevin. I can't remember. I can't remember if I had to write a check or not.
We appreciate you, brother. Always good stuff. Al Bernstein, you can catch him now on Salida Promotions website on YouTube with a Big Time Boxing Show, and on DAZN announcing those Salida promotion shows. Al, I appreciate you as always.
Great to be with you, Mr. Iole. Take care.
Thanks.